Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again to the YouTube audiobook series for The Snake and the Rose, written by Abby Matthies. I am Abby Davis, and today we will be reading Chapter 12, Prophesied. If you have not caught up with the last chapter, link is in the description to go back to it. But if you are all caught up and ready to go, we will continue on with Chapter 12, Prophesied.
I sat in Abby's computer chair as she fell asleep. I knew that today had been a lot, but I didn't think she would collapse from exhaustion. I was kind of glad that I was there to catch her when I did, and now I knew that she was safe in her bed sleeping. I watched her sleep a little, remembering the times I tucked Damien in, all the times I had to check under his bed for monsters or ghouls, all the moments where I read him bedtime stories and played with his hair to soothe him. The many times he had a nightmare and yelled for me instead of Nala. I felt like his big protector and I could do anything. But now, all of that was taken away from me. I felt my eyes start to water as all those memories flooded my head. I didn't want Abby to wake up and see me emotional like this, so I quickly wiped my eyes and cleared my throat to move on. I watched Abby for a little longer to make sure she was truly asleep. Once that was done, I walked into her other room to find my bed still did not appear. I was a little upset by this because I wanted to get some shut-eye myself. At that moment, I figured I would just sleep on the floor, as profound as it may sound. But there was really no other choice. I wasn't gonna just climb into Abby's bed. She would freak the fuck out. So with that, I laid myself on the floor and went to sleep. I found myself in a pitch-black room once more, but there were sounds this time rather than before. I could hear the sound of flames even though I couldn't see them. After intently listening some more, I could hear a low voice angrily shouting, but the words were muffled to the point you couldn't understand them. I waited a moment before I tried taking a step into the darkness, hoping a light would appear, and it did. The light came on and I was standing across from Satan. He was engulfed in flames from head to toe. His face showed such an angry expression that I could see the veins popping out of his head even from a distance. His hands were clenched at his sides, forming fists. I could see the rapid rising and falling of his shoulders, indicating that he was breathing rapidly, like an angry person would. With his angry fit, I could feel an intense burning sensation throughout my body, ensuring that he was staring at me like a hawk. The burning feeling felt 10 times stronger than what I was used to. It almost felt like to the point my skin was going to catch fire. But I knew it was just a feeling and not reality. After taking in the sight of Satan, I took in the environment that we were in. Turning clockwise, I panned the wide open area which looked to be some sort of training arena. There were very little details except for large torches scattered to light the place, while the walls were made of textured black stone. As I was completing my turn, I saw a girl who was standing in the open with some sort of bubble around her. From first sight, I couldn't recognize her because of the distance and the barrier around her being opaque instead of transparent. I tried taking a step towards her, but was interrupted by Satan shouting at me. "Just what do you think you're doing?" I was just— "Shut up!" he cried. "I have had enough of your excuses. I will not tolerate them anymore." "I am not making up excuses. I don't even understand what the hell is going on. Why are you so angry?" I yelled back to him in confusion. He didn't respond, and the flames around him intensified. I stood there shocked as he continued his rant. You know exactly what is happening. You know about everything. You know that you were the key to this prophecy. And now I have to fight you to get what I want. What the fuck are you talking about? I asked, throwing my hands into the air. I was absolutely baffled at what he said. I was the key to a prophecy? How was I, an unfortunate soul, have any importance to Satan involving prophecies? This seriously must be a mistake. It's not, and I will get what I want whether it be forced or not. At that moment, Satan's hands started to glow, forming two orange plasma balls of electricity. I stared at them as they formed for a split second before I saw him launch them towards me. I swung my arms out in front of me, bracing for the impact, but it never came. Instead, I found myself staring at a red force field barrier surrounding me. Unexpecting that, I quickly brought my hands down, hoping that would disarm it. And it did. Gazing back at Satan, I seen he grew angrier and brought his hand up. Nothing was forming around the hand, which made me grow confused, but I suddenly felt the feeling of something grabbing me around my waist. Then, with one swift motion, Satan rapidly lifted his arm up to the sky, and I went flying with it. I was lifted up helplessly, watching the ground get further and further away from me. As I started to reach the ceiling, I stopped rising and stayed still for another split second. However, just as quick as the takeoff, I was forced just as quickly back downward with my back facing towards the ground. I turned my head to look at the ground to find it creeping up to me more and more. I proceeded to try and pull up my force field again from before, but it was too late. I hit the ground with an incredible amount of force, leaving a crater around me. My vision started becoming blurry while my ears started ringing. I tried to listen beyond the ringing and heard the girl's voice faintly within the distance. I lifted my head to find the hazy girl running towards me. As she approached, she started touching my face and waited for the ringing in my ears to semi-stop before she clearly spoke to me. As we waited, my vision came back to me a little and I could see the girl as a whole. It was Abby. How in the world was she down here in hell with me? And how did she have that force field around her? As I tried to think, she interrupted by speaking to me.
Darius, stay with me. You can't black out right now. Don't let him win.
What do you mean don't let him win? What happens if I black out? I said, starting to drift off. Abby then smacked my face to force me to focus on her. I felt the slight sting of her slap, but I was more focused on the pain of my head and body to be fully aware of it.
Don't! Stay awake! If you fall to defeat, we're all doomed.
How are we doomed?
Don't you remember? Satan's going to use you to...
And as she was talking, my body jolted itself awake, unable to finish the dream. As I was jolted upward to sit up, I found myself breathing extremely hard, almost to the point where my lungs were gasping for air. I couldn't help but let my mind race a little after having that dream. Satan never told me about any prophecies that I would have possibly been involved in. However, I wouldn't expect him to. If he couldn't even tell me the simplest of details about anything else, why would he tell me something big like that? And how come I had this dream instead of my regular deal-making dream? Was this truly a sign? Was this trying to warn me about my future? I doubted it, though. There was still a key part of the puzzle that made the dream unbelievable. Abby was in hell. The number one law down in hell was that no human was allowed. If a human became a demon, though, they were allowed access to this torturous society. Abby was a full human in my dream. and even Satan can't mess around with pure humans. With that crucial piece of evidence, I concluded that the dream was nothing. I reeled my thoughts back in and calmed myself down to take in my surroundings finally. As I looked about me, I noticed that I wasn't in Abby's room with the LED lights. I was back in my home, in hell. I recognized my bed, desk, and side table that were designated to me so many years ago. I began lifting my hands to my head to feel my messy hair from sleeping and my horns sticking out of my forehead. I was my normal self again, but I was confused on why I was down in hell rather than up with Abby. As I thought upon it, I started to think maybe I was never paired with her. Maybe it was just one hell of a dream, but there was only one way to confirm it. I continued by lifting up my left arm and turned it so the top of my forearm it was exposed. As I examined myself, I seen that unusual brand mark was still displayed upon my arm. The snake that was meticulously wrapped around a rose. Knowing this was still on my arm, it meant everything with Abby did happen. I truly was a protector demon for a young lady, and these tattoo-like brand marks we had bonded us together. We were honestly stuck, and there was nothing we could do about it. Upon those thoughts, I brought my right arm up to touch it. I could still feel the indents in my skin with each line that formed the marking. As I was touching it, I had some sort of hologram shoot outward to display itself to me. I flinched back a little from the unexpected lights that just popped out of my arm. I gazed back at it to find different holographic sensors and meters. On instinct, I immediately brought it to my face to get a better look at it. Upon examination, I could see 4 different meters indicating as follows: hunger, thirst, energy, and threat. Each one had a bar which I assumed measured the amount of their designated category. They all were even color coded, with the iconic red, yellow, and green colors to symbolize the danger level within it. All the levels were in green for the moment except for the energy and threat level. The energy bar was in the yellow and was slowly rising from each second. The threat level didn't show anything, which I assumed meant that there was no threat. I stared at the hologram in amazement. I knew that these monitors were very simplistic and childish to a certain extent, but it made me feel like a patient in a hospital. The only problem was I wasn't sleeping. So why was the meter going up? I looked at the hologram closer to find a heart rate monitor on the bottom right corner with the title Abby's Heart. The heart rate was slow and steady, indicating that she was calm. After seeing that, everything was put in perspective. The hologram showed me the levels for Abby. This was a tool to help me keep up with Abby's health. I was allowed access to keep track of her physically and mentally because of this whole protector demon job. The whole thing just blew my mind. I gazed at the holographic screen as a whole and noticed another aspect to the monitor. By the energy level, there was a dark blue light slowly blinking next to its title. There were words that displayed sleeping, free roam activated, simultaneously blinking within it. I sat on the bed pondering about that sensor. Sleeping, free roam activated. That must be the reason why I was down in hell. I must be allowed to do whatever I please when she's sleeping. I didn't have to be by her side 24/7. My dream must have had some effect on that. I dreamed about hell, so now I was in it? But I still couldn't wrap my head around why I had that oblivious dream. Was it something I truly had to worry about? Should I try to go to Satan to demand for answers? I probably shouldn't. It was already like pulling teeth trying to get information from him for the Protector Demon stuff. He wouldn't do anything to help me out. And upon that conclusive thought, I decided to take advantage of the unknown time limit I had to research about my new job, rather than wait on Satan to tell me. I then began to situate myself off the bed and towards my closet to find my clothes magically cleaned, like they always were when I took them off. I dressed once more and ventured out into hell to go to the bookstore. I knew I could have just gone to the library to find some sort of informational book I needed, but I didn't like being out in public for an extended period of time. Hell was the kind of place where everyone judged what you were doing every second you were out and had no set laws against crime. Demons and succubuses could act and talk however they pleased. I have had encounters involving trash talk, but I never had physical fights. I'm assuming that was because of my height and somewhat muscular stature. But another reason I figured the bookstore would be better is because I could look up my answers right away within my home instead of traveling again. After about 15 demon minutes, I ended up walking into Devilish Square. The square was full of clothing stores, businesses with instruments of torture, weapons, and food places for others to spend their free time in. As I entered, I could see all kinds of demons and succubuses that walked and loitered alongside the streets. There were no modes of transportation like cars, motorcycles, livestock, etc. The only way you could transport yourself faster was if you had levitation powers, wings, or teleportation. Since I had none of those advantages, I was forced to walk everywhere I went. I started my way to the bookstore by walking down the middle of the street. I didn't like the idea of possibly being the center of attention, but it was pretty much a clear walking path rather than walking towards the sides. As I traveled, I could see clusters of demons gazing at me. They were whispering to one another and gossiping like their usual selves. However, my eye was caught when I started seeing a handful of strangers pointing towards my side. I continued to walk past them with a feeling of concern. They just kept pointing at my side and mingled in their groups. As I moved along, I gave into my emotions and gazed at the side they were pointing at. Nothing changed about me. I still looked like my normal self with the black pants and red textured shirt with the sleeves rolled up formally to my elbows. I couldn't pinpoint the exact reason why I would be drawing attention. Nonetheless, I quickly found out why people were acting the way they were. It was because of the tattoo. Because my sleeves were always rolled up to my elbows, the tattoo was in visible sight for everyone to see. Also, the tattoo was faced outward because of it being on the top of my forearm, which didn't help either. In that moment, I made a direct decision to counteract my feeling of concern by pulling down my sleeves. As I was about to move the left sleeve, I bumped into another demon who blocked my walk path. I gazed down to see an older man using his force field spell to prevent me from fully trampling him. I started to apologize for running into him, but he didn't say a word. He just gazed up at me and then at the tattoo on my arm. After a couple of seconds, I decided to try and move around him to continue on my way. As I did so, he shifted in front of me to continue blocking me. I started to grow aggravated and spoke to him again. "Hey, I said I was sorry. Can't you just let me pass?"
"You bear the mark,"
he said, disregarding my question. "I don't know what you're talking about."
"The brand tattooed on your arm. You're the chosen one."
"Yeah, chosen to live in this fuck show called hell." I said sarcastically with a chuckle at the end. The old man didn't take my sentence as a joke, though. He continued to stare at me with an unimpressed look.
"You are a seeker of truth. If that is so, follow me to seek your truth."
There was no way I was going to trust this man. He was a total stranger that I never met before. I hadn't even seen him before. If I couldn't trust most of the demons in hell, what would make him so different? I started to shake my head in disgust and spoke. "Sir, I have better things to do than be tricked into your little charades. Now, if you excuse me, I have work to do." I continued to walk around him and stepped away when suddenly he said,
"Don't you want to see how that mark is unique to you and no one else?"
With that, I stopped in my tracks and turned back around. Unique to me? How is this unique to me and no one else? And how would he know that?
"You were done wrong by our unruly creator. He has taken away everything you held most dear to you by his foolish tricks. You have lived in such torment since that day you signed that contract with him. He is the one to blame, not you."
How the hell did he know all that? I have never told anyone about how I was played by Satan. Abby is the only soul that knows. As I gazed at him in shock, he turned himself away from me and started walking. On instinct, I followed him like he wanted and went into a dark alleyway between the strip club and the potion store. As I got closer to him, he used some sort of spell to project a barrier that surrounded the alley. I was now stuck and forced to commit to my decision I made.
"This barrier is soundproof and camouflaged. You may leave at any point in time, but it would be wise to wait until you gain all of the true knowledge."
I began to feel a little better as he told me that. If this conversation got weird at any point, I could just walk away from it. With that, I nodded my head and began to listen intently.
"We have waited so many years, so many millennia for a demon like you."
What do you mean, like me? I don't even know you. So how can you know so much about me? I asked.
"Because of you being the chosen one. You are the one who is prophesied about. You are the outcast in hell that will save us all."
Save us from what? What the fuck are you talking about? What prophecy am I prophesied in? Stop telling me I'm the one and give me details. I spelled out, agitated a little. If this was true, I wanted to know the exact details about it.
"The prophecy states that the promised demon will have a mark of odd familiarity, one of its kind. I have been living here for a long time and have never seen a marking like that.
He told me, proceeding to point to my arm.
Another thing, you are one of the tallest demons I have seen besides Satan himself. In fact, guessing by your height, you are around the same height as him. That isn't a coincidence. It is fate.
And how would you know that? Maybe it is. I have always been this way since I came down here. Another thing, this marking could mean anything. How do you know that this isn't associated with my job? You don't know any personal information about me, and I don't plan on telling you.
But I know the most important information. You were destined for greatness, and it was taken away from you because of Satan and his schemes. You have been tormented all these years by your regrets and bask in them unwillingly. The time is coming, young man, where everything will be reversed and everything will change.
We both stood there for a moment. I didn't know if I wanted to believe him or not. The words coming out of his mouth sounded like nonsense. I willingly followed this stranger into a back alley for him to bring up how Satan screwed me over. But in hell, everyone got screwed over by him. We all suffered for many years by the hands of him. And upon those thoughts, I felt like a fool for believing in his nonsense. Yeah, right. You keep telling yourself that. I said, not knowing what else to say. The man nodded his head and gave me a smirk. I then proceeded to turn myself around and exit the alleyway. I proceeded onward to the bookstore, trying to brush off the conversation with the old man. There was no way any of that was true. I didn't even know that there were prophecies in hell. Plus, there were plenty of other demons that were better suited for prophecy fulfilling than me. And by the time my thoughts came to an end, I was at my destination. The bookstore wasn't the biggest place ever. It was actually quite small in height and width. Not many demons actually bought books. Books were not one of the main sources of entertainment in hell. There were plenty of other things to do rather than looking at pages with words. However, they couldn't get rid of it because there were still men and women who needed the books. So instead of demolishing it, they decreased the size by a lot. I had to crouch down in order to walk through the door. Upon entry, I seen that it was run down and definitely needed some repairs. The book clerk stood to the left behind the counter, while the 4 shelves stood to the right. They had some books on each shelf, but not enough to make the books stand on their own. I made my way to the shelves and started my search. After about 5 demon minutes, I found the shelf that I needed. I looked accordingly at the titles and descriptions of each book. I got 4 books in total. One with protector demon information, one about powers, one about eyes, and one about wings. I didn't really need the last book, but I wanted to learn the anatomy of them and see how they functioned. It piqued my interest. With the books in my hand, I made my way to the clerk. She stood silent the entire time I was in the store. But as soon as I buy books, she has to be nosy.
So I'm gonna assume that you are a protector demon.
Maybe, maybe not. I could just want it for entertainment purposes, I said, trying to lead her off my trail.
It's nothing to be ashamed of. I have noticed over time that only protector demons get this kind of book. I haven't seen any recently, so it's nice to see that Satan is still being an ass and not providing important information to those who need it.
I stayed silent after that remark. It just made me angry knowing that he didn't give information to other protector demons along with myself. I knew she was trying to be nice, so I faked a smile as she checked me out the rest of the way.
There you go, sir. Have a hellish day.
She said, giving me my bagged books. I nodded and replied like a good customer and left. I quickly made my way home so I could get to reading. I didn't know how much time I had left to myself, and I wanted to go back to Abby with some information. Plus, I noticed I was the center of attention again, like before, and didn't like it one bit. After a 30-minute walk, I made it to my home, where I could finally confine myself to solitude. I began to take out my books and place them on my desk, stacking them on top of each other. I placed the book Protector Demon Tips and Tricks on top, knowing I was going to read that one first. As I looked upon the book, I decided I wanted a drink. After all the stress I have been under and chaotic shit that has been happening, I needed something to help me relax. After pouring myself my usual whiskey on the rocks, I brought it to my desk, sat down, and started to read. Now, I will admit that one of the best abilities I gained since I became a demon was the ability to read really fast. I could read fast when I was alive, but now it only takes me 5 demon minutes to read an entire book. However, when it came to reading these books, I wanted to take my time in reading them. As I was reading, I was highlighting information that I felt was important to me, such as demons of this kind gain different powers according to the child's needs. Or, a protector demon can free roam with their child after a span of 2 months. Until then, they can only free roam when the child sleeps. I was more trying to find information about the tattoo I had on my arm and the connection it had with Abby. But the only thing I found on it was that the protector demon and child would get matching markings as a pairing mechanism. After about 30 minutes of going through that book, I switched to the next book labeled Eyes and Designs, All Different Kinds. I started reading trying to find the eye type I had and found it on page 58 under the category One of a Kind. There were 2 different types that I read that could be my eye, but I wasn't quite sure. The first one was called Corrupted, and the second was called Immortal. I read both of them carefully to compare the two, as they were both similar to each other. They looked very much alike. However, the corrupted eyes looked more like a human eye, with red colors rather than a multi-ring eye like the immortal eyes. With the 2 comparisons in mind, I got up from my chair to examine my eyes in the mirror. Leaning in close, I could see that the eye design didn't look too different from my last pair of eyes. The only true difference I spotted was that the eye color was a deep ruby red. The eyes didn't look too inhumane like they could have gotten. But this led me to the conclusion that I had the corrupted eyes. I went back to my desk and sat in my chair for a minute. I reflected on some of the information I learned and how much I have changed already. But I knew the changes were not close to being over. It's only been like 3 days. It was impossible for everything to kick in at once. I was so lost in that thought, I didn't realize the burst of energy that built within me again. And with a flash, I was teleported back to Abby as she was sitting up in her bed. It shocked her just as much as it shocked me, but we both ended up breathing sighs of frustration as we stared at each other thinking of what the next move was in this dynamic duo partnership we were in.
This has been Chapter 12, Prophesied, from the book The Snake and the Rose. Tune in to the next video for Chapter 13. Thank you for listening.